I have held a human heart in my hands, still warm, still fighting. I have watched monitors flatline while a mother screamed in the hallway. I have told husbands their wives weren't coming home. I have delivered news that shattered entire bloodlines in a single sentence. After 12 years as a trauma surgeon, I thought I had seen the worst kind of betrayal, the body betraying itself. I was wrong. Nothing prepared me for the moment I stood in my own living room, smiling at 50 guests, and watched my baby sister drop white powder into my champagne. Not a stranger, not an enemy, my sister, the girl I protected from bullies. The girl whose failed business I funded. The girl whose rent I paid. The girl who cried on my shoulder and called me her hero. She looked around carefully, then she tipped the packet into the glass etched with my name, and smiled. That was the moment I understood something terrifying. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was planned. And she expected me to die. But here's what she didn't account for: you don't survive 12 years in an operating room by panicking. You survive by staying calm when everyone else collapses. So while she tried to kill me, I performed the most dangerous operation of my life, without a scalpel, without anesthesia, without mercy. And before this night was over, someone was going to swallow their own poison. Let me take you back. Beacon Hill, October, air sharp and cold outside. My brownstone glowing warm against the dark, 10 years of marriage. That's what we were celebrating, 10 years with Daniel. I spent weeks planning it, not flashy, not vulgar, just elegant, soft lighting, string quartet, crystal flutes engraved with our names. 50 guests filled the house. Colleagues from Boston General, neighbors, distant relatives. Everyone thought we were the perfect couple, and maybe we looked like it. Daniel stood near the fireplace, charming as always, 43, still handsome. Graying at the temples in that distinguished way, easy smile, confident voice. But something about him that night felt lighter, too light, like a man who had already detached from something. At the time, I told myself I was imagining it. I was wrong about that too. Across the room stood my mother, Margaret, navy silk dress, silver hair flawless, composed, controlled. She wasn't standing with me, she was standing with Laura, of course she was. They were leaning into each other, whispering, laughing softly. When I approached, the conversation stopped. That tiny shift, that subtle silence. You learn to read microexpressions in surgery. The smallest twitch can mean internal bleeding. The slightest color change can signal organ failure. And in that moment, something felt wrong. Laura came toward me with a champagne flute. "Emily," she said, hugging me, "everything is so beautiful. Daniel is so lucky." Her voice was sweet, practiced, too practiced. She smelled expensive. Her dress was designer. Jewelry new. Last month she called me crying because she couldn't make rent. I paid it. So where did Valentino come from? "Thank you for coming," I told her. "I'd never miss my big sister's special night," she said. Her hand squeezed mine a second too long, then she walked toward the serving station. And that's when the night shifted. The glasses were set apart. 2 crystal flutes, one etched Emily, one etched Daniel. Custom-made, special, symbolic. I watched her from across the room. She pulled out her phone, typed something, deleted it. Her hands trembled. She looked around. Daniel had just excused himself from a conversation. He moved toward the back hallway, not outside, not to the bathroom, just away. That timing, too perfect. Laura reached into her clutch, small white paper packet, tore it open. Poured. The powder dissolved instantly. Not sugar, not salt, fast-dissolving compound. My brain shifted into clinical mode. Texture wrong, movement controlled, breathing steady. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. This was intent. Time slowed. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, steady, regulated. In residency, I learned something critical. When blood is spraying across the room and everyone is screaming, the surgeon who panics kills the patient. I was not going to be the patient tonight. I moved, not rushed, not frantic. I walked through guests, accepting compliments, smiling politely. Inside, my mind was calculating. Distance to the table. Line of sight, witness positioning. I positioned myself near the staircase first. Watched again. Laura stirred the drink gently, then I saw it. Her phone screen lit up. One message preview flashed before she locked it. "Done. Get ready." Get ready for what? Daniel re-entered the room. He didn't look at her. She didn't look at him. But their bodies aligned for half a second. It was enough. Conspiracy doesn't require eye contact, just coordination. 3 minutes until the toast. I walked to the serving station. Two glasses side by side, my name on the left, Daniel's on the right. My hands moved the way they do in surgery, automatic, precise. One smooth motion, left became right, right became left. Then I did something else. I removed Daniel's original glass entirely, placed a clean catering glass in its place. Now there were two safe glasses and one poison glass positioned exactly where Laura always stood during family toasts. Habit is powerful, people reach where they expect to reach. And Laura had always stood to my right. My phone buzzed, unknown number. You should leave early tonight, trust me. I deleted it, no reaction. The string quartet stopped. Daniel called for attention. Friends, family? His voice smooth, warm, rehearsed. I watched him with new eyes. Was he nervous or excited? Laura picked up the glasses. She handed me the one etched with my name. Clean, she handed Daniel his. Clean, then she picked up the remaining glass, the poisoned one. She raised it high. To my amazing sister, she said, her smile radiant. May this next decade bring you everything you deserve. There are moments in life where time fractures. This was one of them. Everyone drank. I took a small sip, watched over the rim. Laura tilted her head back and swallowed every drop. 30 seconds. She laughed. 60 seconds. She blinked hard. 90 seconds. Her hand gripped the table. It's warm in here, she murmured. 2 minutes. Her pupils constricted. Pinpoint. Meiosis. Central nervous system depression. 3 minutes. Her knees buckled. The glass shattered. Laura collapsed, convulsing, foam at her mouth. 50 guests froze. Silence swallowed the room. And I realized something chilling. She didn't expect to feel it. Which means she believed she would not be drinking that glass. Which means she was certain I would. And that certainty only comes from coordination. The room erupted into chaos. Screaming, shouting. Call 911, I dropped beside her, because no matter what she had done, I was still a doctor, and she was still my sister. Her body was rigid, jaw clenched. Respiratory depression beginning. I tilted her head back, cleared airway, checked pulse, weak but present. While I worked, my mind worked on another level. Where was Daniel? I glanced up. He wasn't rushing forward. He wasn't kneeling beside us. He was standing near the back hallway, watching, not shocked, not confused, watching like a man waiting to see if a plan succeeded or failed. That's when something inside me shifted, not panic, not grief, clarity. This wasn't just about Laura, this was bigger. Ambulance sirens approached. My mother pushed through the crowd. She grabbed my wrist. What did you give her? She hissed. Even now, even with Laura convulsing on the floor, she blamed me. That was the moment I understood something else. I had never truly belonged in this family. I stabilized Laura until paramedics arrived. Gave clinical briefing. Female, 36. Suspected flunitrazepam ingestion, seizure activity. Respiratory compromise. They loaded her up. I preserved the base of the champagne glass. Evidence. Daniel didn't ride in the ambulance. He stayed behind, watching, again. And as the doors closed and the sirens pulled away, I realized something chilling. If I had taken one full swallow instead of a sip, if I hadn't seen her, if I hadn't switched the glasses, I would be the one convulsing. I would be the headline. Prominent surgeon suffers mental breakdown at anniversary party. And Laura would be holding my hand, crying for cameras. By the time we reached the hospital, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't jealousy. This was a coordinated attempt to destroy me. And I had just survived the first incision. But wars aren't won in one move. They're won in silence, precision, patience. And I was done being the sister who rescued everyone. From this moment forward, I would be the one they underestimated. Hospitals smell different at night. Less like antiseptic, more like quiet desperation. Fluorescent lights humming, footsteps echoing down polished floors. Families slumped in plastic chairs praying for miracles they don't believe in. I've walked those corridors thousands of times as the one people depend on. That night, I walked them as a suspect. Laura was stabilized within 40 minutes. Respiratory depression reversed, seizures controlled, vitals weak but steady. The toxicology screen was pending. I stood outside her room staring through the glass. She looked small in the hospital bed. Fragile, vulnerable, innocent. And that image, that carefully composed image, made something cold settle into my chest. Because Laura understood something I had never mastered. People believe what looks like weakness. And I looked like strength. Strength doesn't win sympathy. Strength wins suspicion. Margaret arrived 20 minutes later. She didn't hug me, she didn't ask if I was all right. She stood across from me in the hallway, arms folded. "What happened?" she demanded. "Someone put something in her drink," I said calmly, her eyes narrowed. "You were near the glasses." I felt the accusation before she spoke it fully. "You've always been jealous of her." 36 years old, board-certified trauma surgeon. Saved thousands of lives, and I was still the jealous older sister. Laura was wheeled into a private room. When she regained consciousness, everything changed. Because the first thing she did was look at me and recoil. Like I was a monster standing over her bed. "Get her away from me," she whispered. Her voice trembled perfectly. Margaret rushed to her side. "Sweetheart, what is it?" Laura's eyes filled with tears. "She did this to me." The words hung in the air. "She poisoned me?" For a moment, I almost admired the audacity. Not fear, not confusion, immediate accusation, clear, direct, strategic. "She switched the glasses," Laura said weakly. "I saw her." The lie was seamless, rehearsed. Constructed long before tonight. And then the door opened. Detective Marcus Rivera, Boston PD, calm, observant, neutral expression, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at Laura, then at me. "Dr. Carter," he said, "I need to ask you a few questions." They took me to a consultation room upstairs. Small, windowless, metal table, 2 plastic chairs. I've delivered death notifications in rooms like that. Now I sat on the other side. "I want to be clear," Rivera began, opening a notebook. "You're not under arrest, not yet. Walk me through the evening." I had a decision to make, tell him everything, the powder, the switch, the evidence in my pocket. Or wait, in surgery when bleeding isn't visible but you suspect internal rupture, you don't cut blindly, you stabilize first. "I'd like to call my attorney," I said. Rivera paused, then nodded. "Of course." My hands didn't shake. I noticed that he probably did too. Calm can look like guilt, but calm was survival. I texted Rachel Kim, Harvard Law, criminal defense, ruthless in court. Her reply came in under a minute. "On my way, say nothing, good. Because silence is power when truth is weaponized against you." While I waited, my phone buzzed, bank notification. Joint account frozen, pending investigation. I stared at the screen. Frozen already. That doesn't happen this fast without pressure. Someone was pushing this. Hard. Rachel arrived 25 minutes later, impeccable navy suit, hair tight, eyes sharper than any scalpel I've ever used. "Interview is over," she told Rivera flatly. He left without argument. That alone told me something. They weren't certain. Yet, when he returned, his tone had shifted. "Your sister alleges long-standing jealousy," he said. "She claims you've exhibited controlling behavior, that you made comments about wishing she would disappear." I almost laughed. "Disappear? I funded her life." "She also claims you switched the glasses intentionally and panicked when you realized she might expose you." There it was. The narrative: I poison her, she notices, I panic, switch glasses, accidentally poison her instead. Clean, logical, damning. Margaret had already given a statement backing Laura's version. Of course she had. "She says you pushed Laura down the stairs when you were teenagers." I closed my eyes briefly. Laura slipped. I grabbed her, but in Margaret's memory I pushed. History bends easily when someone needs a villain. Rivera closed his notebook. "Don't leave town." I stepped into the hallway. Margaret passed me. She leaned in close. "I always knew something was wrong with you." Those words hurt more than the accusation, because they confirmed something I had avoided for years. I had been on trial in my own family since childhood, and I never knew it. I tried calling Daniel 4 times, voicemail, texted him, "Where are you?" No response. Rachel was watching me carefully. "Where was your husband when she collapsed?" "Near the back hallway." "Did he ride to the hospital?" "No." She frowned, pulled up her phone, did a quick search, then turned the screen toward me. "Daniel Carter checked in Marriott Long Wharf Hotel 45 minutes ago. He wasn't home. He wasn't at the hospital. He was at a hotel while his wife was being investigated for attempted murder." That's when the final layer of denial cracked. Affair, of course. Late nights, financial stress, distance, and Laura always around. I didn't feel heartbreak, I felt clarity. Then something unexpected happened. A nurse I'd worked with for years passed by. Janet Morrison. Our eyes met. She slowed, slipped something into my hand, kept walking. I unfolded the paper in the elevator. 2 sentences. "Check pharmacy records. Your sister bought ketamine 3 days ago." Ketamine, controlled substance, strong sedative, hard to acquire legally. My pulse remained steady, but the game had changed. Rachel read the note, her expression darkened. She was planning this? She's been planning for months, I said quietly. Rachel hesitated. There's more. She opened her tablet, pulled up a document. Court filing, 3 days before the party, petition for conservatorship, petitioner. Laura Bennett, subject, Emily Carter, grounds, paranoid ideation, emotional instability, potential danger to self and others. I stared at my name typed across legal documents. She was trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. Rachel nodded. And look at the co-signer. I scanned down, signature Daniel Carter. My husband signed a document claiming I was mentally unfit. The room felt smaller. Air thinner, it clicked. If I collapsed at my party in front of 50 witnesses after erratic behavior, a conservatorship petition already filed, emergency guardianship could be granted within days. Laura would control my finances, my property, my medical decisions, and Daniel, as supportive spouse, would stand beside her. $2 million life insurance. Primary beneficiary, Daniel. Secondary, Laura. They didn't just want control, they wanted everything. If I died, Daniel wins. If I survived but appeared unstable, Laura wins. It was airtight, elegant, calculated, and they underestimated one thing, me. We returned home at 4 a.m., the house still decorated, flowers wilting. Champagne glasses abandoned mid-celebration. Police tape on the Persian rug. Daniel's closet half empty. He came while I was gone, packed, left, no note, no explanation, just absence. 10 years erased in suitcases. His wedding ring sat on the bathroom counter. I picked it up, felt its weight, then dropped it in the trash. No tears, no rage, only precision. In the kitchen, I found a handwritten note. 7 words. I'm sorry it came to this. Not I'm sorry. Not I love you. It came to this, as if my destruction was an inevitable outcome, as if I had forced his hand. That sentence told me everything about his character. At 7 a.m., Rachel returned with coffee and a folder thick enough to break bones. You need to see this. Laura's debt, $587,000, credit cards, personal loans, and the worst part, online gambling. Loan sharks, threat messages, they knew where she lived, where Margaret lived. Laura wasn't just greedy, she was desperate. Desperate people rationalize anything, including murder. There was also a receipt, private investigator, 6 months ago. Subject me, she'd been building a case against me, collecting fragments to twist. Every therapy session after Dad died, every stressed moment, every long shift, weaponized. My father, the thought of him hit unexpectedly. He died 10 years ago, single car accident. Wet road, sharp curve, ruled accidental, case closed, but something Daniel said later that day would reopen everything. Rachel found something else. Text logs between Daniel and Laura. 18 months long. I forced myself to read them clinically, inside jokes, hotel rooms, miss you. After this is done, we'll be free. And then 20 minutes before the toast, Daniel, glasses are set, don't mess this up. There it was. Coordination, proof. My marriage hadn't crumbled, it had been cannibalized from the inside for years. And in that moment, I felt something shift completely. Not heartbreak, not despair, strategy. They had tried to perform surgery on my life without anesthesia, without consent. They thought I would bleed quietly. They thought I would collapse under accusation. They thought I would defend myself emotionally. They were wrong. Because I don't operate emotionally, I operate precisely. And I had just gathered enough evidence to begin the real procedure. Silent revenge isn't loud, it's documented, layered, timed, and delivered when the other side believes they've already won. By noon, Laura announced a press conference. She was going public, accusing me nationally, attempted murder, abusive sister, controlling wife. The narrative was spreading faster than truth ever could. Hashtags, headlines, public outrage. My hospital placed me on administrative leave. Privileges suspended, reputation bleeding out in real time. Colleagues went silent. Friends disappeared. Isolation is louder than screaming, but I didn't crumble. Because by that point, I knew something they didn't. I had footage, security cameras, cloud storage, Daniel standing guard while Laura poisoned my drink. And I wasn't going to release it yet, not immediately, because revenge served too early is defense. Revenge served strategically is domination. Is where I stopped reacting and started hunting. The first rule of survival in war is simple. Stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided you're guilty. The morning after Laura's press conference, my name was everywhere. Prominent Boston surgeon accused of attempted murder. They used my professional photo, the one from the hospital website, neutral expression, direct gaze, white coat. They cropped it tight, made me look cold. Next to it, they ran Laura's photo, soft lighting, natural makeup, eyes slightly red from crying, victim versus villain. The internet chose instantly. Number Justice for Laura started trending before noon. Strangers dissected my personality based on a photograph. Female surgeons are always narcissists. She looks emotionally detached. I bet she abused her husband. My address leaked within hours. Reporters parked outside my brownstone. The hospital deactivated my access badge. 9 years of surgeries, 4,000 procedures, gone with a single email. I stood in my kitchen holding my phone, reading strangers celebrate my destruction. And I felt nothing, not numbness, clarity, because the more dramatic Laura became, the more careful I became. When someone is performing for the world, you don't interrupt the show. You let them overact. You let them get comfortable. You let them forget you're watching. Rachel called by noon. The toxicology report is final, she said. Rohypnol, high concentration, enough to induce respiratory failure. I closed my eyes briefly. She hadn't miscalculated dosage. She had planned for lethal outcome. She's escalating, Rachel added. She's hired Victor Ashford. I exhaled slowly. Ashford, high-profile victim attorney, media savvy, he doesn't take weak cases. Which meant Laura had convinced him, or lied convincingly enough. Rachel continued, we have the security footage, we have Daniel's texts, we have the conservatorship filing, we can go public. No, I said immediately. There was silence on the other end. No, if we release everything now, it looks reactive, defensive, and I don't want to defend myself. I want to dismantle them, there's a difference. Silence makes people uncomfortable. But silence also builds pressure. I wanted Laura to lean into her lie, to expand it, to commit to it publicly, because once someone commits fully, they can't backtrack. That afternoon, I received a call from Detective Rivera. We need you to come in tomorrow, he said. There's been a development. What kind of development? A witness, a nurse from my hospital, claiming I threatened to kill Laura 3 weeks before the party. The accusation was almost elegant in its cruelty. I could kill you and make it look like an accident. I'm a surgeon. It was believable. That's what made it dangerous, because technically I could. And the public loves a narrative that fits their fear. A brilliant surgeon with a dark mind. Cold, calculating, dangerous. Except I had never said those words. Not to Laura, not to anyone. I already knew who it was, Denise Hartley. Former surgical nurse, transferred after multiple formal complaints. Sloppy protocols, missed counts, argued with residents. She hated me, resented my precision, resented correction. And now she was willing to commit perjury. For what? Money, manipulation, or loyalty to Laura? The pieces were aligning too smoothly. That told me something else. Laura had help, not just Daniel, not just Denise. This was layered, and that meant she felt confident. Confidence is exploitable. That evening, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang. I assumed reporters. Instead, it was a young catering server from the party, Marcus. He looked terrified. I saw what happened, he said. I recorded it. I let him in, closed the door. He played the video, shaky, partially blocked by flowers, but clear enough. Laura approaching the glasses, looking around, dropping white powder into the flute engraved with my name. My pulse stayed steady. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked. I'm on a work visa, he said quietly. My boss told me not to get involved. Fear keeps truth buried, but conscience brought him to my door. Then he showed me the second video. The toast. The exact moment I switched the glasses. Clear, undeniable, 2 seconds of movement that saved my life. I watched myself on screen. Calm, precise, surgical. That footage changed everything. Because now it wasn't just about disproving her accusation. It proved intent. It proved self-defense. It proved premeditation on her side. I called Rachel immediately. She arrived within 20 minutes. Watched both videos 3 times. This, she said quietly, is checkmate. No, I corrected her. It's leverage. Checkmate comes later. That night I made my first offensive move, not public, private. I called Daniel. He agreed to meet at the Marriott. Of course he did. He probably thought I wanted reconciliation. Closure. Begging. Men like Daniel assume women react emotionally. He underestimated me for 10 years. He wasn't going to stop now. The hotel bar was dim, neutral territory. He looked exhausted. Unshaven, worn down, guilt ages people. I sat across from him, placed my phone on the table, recording. "Tell me about Laura," I said calmly. He froze. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." He confessed within 10 minutes, 3-year affair, hotel rooms, financial transfers, helping her file conservatorship. He tried to minimize it. "I didn't know she'd use poison." That sentence told me everything. He knew there would be a setup, he just didn't expect lethal, moral cowardice. He was willing to destroy me, just not kill me. There's a difference in his mind. Not in mine. Then he gave me something I didn't expect. A USB drive. "Everything," he said, emails, plans, account numbers. He had grown afraid. Laura was becoming reckless, and reckless people eliminate loose ends. He suspected he was next. I took the drive, no gratitude, no forgiveness. "I want you out of my life," I told him. "Sign whatever Rachel sends, cooperate fully, or I release everything." He agreed immediately. Fear is persuasive. As I stood to leave, he said something that stopped me cold. "It's about your father." My spine went rigid. Laura said his accident wasn't an accident. My father died 10 years ago. Single car crash, wet road, officially accidental. But Daniel continued. "She said he found out she was forging his signature. He planned to cut her out of the will. 3 days before that meeting, he died. The room felt smaller, air heavier. Could Laura be capable of that? The answer formed slowly. Yes, because I once believed she'd never poison me either. And yet she did. When I left the hotel, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like your father." I stared at the message. Threat. Confirmation, fear tactic. Which meant I was getting close to something bigger than a conservatorship scam, something older, darker. Laura wasn't improvising. She had a pattern: financial desperation, manipulation, victim narrative. Strategic removal of obstacles. I drove home slowly, thought carefully, because the game had escalated, and escalation requires controlled response. Not emotion, not rage, precision. The next morning, Rachel met me at a quiet coffee shop. We reviewed the USB contents. It was worse than we thought. Laura had created fake medical notes, drafted psychological observations about me, cataloged moments out of context. She was building a long-term case for incompetence. There were spreadsheets tracking my net worth, life insurance breakdowns, projected inheritance. They had planned every scenario: death, institutionalization, divorce. She had calculated it all except one variable: my refusal to break. "Here's what we do," Rachel said. "We don't go public yet." I nodded. "First, we give the footage to Detective Rivera. Privately. Second, we subpoena Denise's financial records. If she's lying, there will be incentive. And third," Rachel looked at me carefully, "we reopen your father's accident." That was the moment everything shifted from self-defense to investigation. Because if Laura had done this before, if my father wasn't an accident, then this wasn't revenge. This was exposure. And exposure destroys people more completely than punishment. That afternoon, Detective Rivera watched the footage. He didn't speak for nearly 2 minutes, then he leaned back. "Why didn't you bring this forward immediately?" "Because I wanted to see who committed fully to the lie," I said calmly. His eyes studied me differently now, not as suspect. As strategist. He requested a warrant for Laura's phone records, financial records, communication logs. The nurse witness suddenly seemed less credible. Denise's bank statements revealed a $25,000 deposit. 2 days after the party, transferred from an account linked to Laura. Perjury isn't cheap, and desperation makes people sloppy. Rivera's tone changed entirely. "You understand," he said quietly, "this is going to flip fast." "Yes," I replied. "It will, because Laura had gone too public, too dramatic, too absolute. When a liar overcommits, they can't retreat. They can only fall." That night I sat alone in my living room, the house still quiet, still partially decorated. The flowers now wilted completely. I thought about my father, his laugh, his steady hands, the way he used to say, "Emily, strength isn't loud, it's consistent." I had misunderstood that for years. Strength isn't shouting your innocence. It's gathering proof quietly and waiting. Laura believed she had buried me publicly. She believed the internet was on her side. She believed the hospital suspension would break me. She believed Daniel's betrayal would shatter me. She believed Margaret's rejection would isolate me. She believed wrong because something inside me had hardened, not into cruelty, into focus. And focus is lethal. Segment 4 is where Laura realized she hadn't poisoned a victim. She had awakened a surgeon. Autopsy of a lie. There's a moment in every surgery when you make the first incision. It's quiet, controlled, deliberate. And once you cut, there's no pretending the problem doesn't exist. That's where we were now. Detective Rivera didn't call it that. He called it formal review. But I knew what it was, an autopsy, not of a body, of a narrative, and Laura's story was about to be opened. The warrant for her phone records came through in 48 hours. That alone told me something. Rivera believed me now, or at least he no longer believed her. When they pulled her messages from the cloud backup, the timeline became devastating. Search history: how long does Rohypnol take to dissolve? Non-detectable sedatives in alcohol. Symptoms of rapid overdose. Emergency guardianship filing timeline. All within 10 days of the party. Premeditation doesn't get clearer than that, but what truly shifted the case was the draft folder. She had written a statement. Saved, not sent. If something goes wrong tonight and I don't wake up, Emily has always hated me. She had pre-written her own martyr speech. Insurance, in case the dosage miscalculated, in case I fought back, in case she needed to pivot the narrative. That level of contingency planning chilled even Rivera. This isn't emotional, he said quietly in the precinct conference room. No, I replied, it's financial. Because when you strip away performance, motives become numbers, and Laura's numbers were catastrophic. Her gambling debt wasn't just 6 figures. It was tied to a private lender operating through shell companies. Rivera's financial crimes unit traced it to a name I recognized from the threat text. Victor Salerno, not the attorney. The lender, a man currently under federal investigation for coercive collections, which explained the urgency. She wasn't just greedy, she was cornered, and cornered people either surrender or attack. Laura attacked. But the deeper we dug, the more uncomfortable the questions became, especially about my father. Rachel had petitioned to access archived accident reports. 10 years old, closed, minimal investigation, single car crash, no skid marks. Driver's side impact, airbag deployed, fatal cervical fracture, ruled hydroplaning. Case closed within 48 hours, too fast. That detail stuck with Rivera. Too fast for a fatality involving a high-profile business owner. Then we found something else. A mechanic's report from 2 weeks before the accident. Brake line replaced. The mechanic had noted corrosion inconsistent with vehicle age. The brake line had been cut. Clean, deliberate, not corrosion, cut. I stared at the scanned image on Rachel's tablet. My father had mentioned an argument with Laura the week before he died. He called her reckless, said she was dangerous with money. I dismissed it at the time, sibling drama, nothing more. 3 days later, he was dead, and Laura inherited immediately. Not majority, but enough to stabilize her failing boutique, until she destroyed that too. The pattern wasn't emotional, it was structural. Obstacle appears. Laura manipulates, obstacle disappears, she profits, and now I had been the obstacle. Rivera reopened the case officially, which meant subpoenas, interviews, and public silence. We didn't release anything yet, not even the footage. Because now the objective had shifted. It wasn't just clearing my name, it was exposing a decade-long pattern, and patterns collapse harder than single lies. Laura, meanwhile, grew louder. Second press conference. More tears. More trembling voice. She described childhood abuse, isolation, emotional torment. She painted me as cold, clinical, cruel. Emily doesn't feel things, she said to cameras. That's what makes her dangerous. The irony almost amused me. I feel everything. I just don't let feelings decide my moves. Public opinion split. Some questioned inconsistencies, others doubled down on outrage. But then something happened Laura didn't anticipate. Victor Ashford withdrew as her attorney. Quietly, no press statement, just a filing, which meant he had seen something, likely discovery disclosures, and he didn't like what he saw. When high-profile attorneys walk away, reporters notice. The narrative began to wobble, not collapse, but wobble, and that's when Laura made her first true mistake. She called me, I let it ring twice, then answered. Her voice was soft. Calculated vulnerability. Emily, can we talk? Silence. I never meant for it to go this far. That sentence again, like Daniel's note, it came to this, never responsibility, always inevitability. What did you mean for? I asked calmly. For you to step aside. There it was, not kill, remove, control. You've always had everything, she continued. Dad loved you more, Mom respected you more, you had the career, the house. Daniel, I almost laughed. You think this was about love? I asked. It was about survival, she snapped suddenly. And there it was, the crack, the real Laura. They were going to break my legs, Emily, do you understand that? I had days, so you chose murder, I chose correction. Correction like I was a mistake to be fixed. You were supposed to take the fall, she said quietly. You were unstable enough, overworked, alone. It would have made sense. I let her talk. Confessions come easier when ego feels safe. You and Daniel were going to move to Zurich eventually anyway. You would have signed everything over. Zurich, we had discussed an overseas fellowship. She planned for my geographic removal too. She thought of everything except failure. Did you cut Dad's brakes? I asked. Silence, breathing, then you always were smarter. Click, she hung up. It wasn't a direct confession. But it was acknowledgement, and the call was recorded. Rivera moved faster after that. Search warrants executed, Laura's apartment searched, hidden safe discovered, inside cash fake ids, and a folder labeled contingency. It contained drafts of letters, suicide notes written in my handwriting. She had practiced forging it. If poisoning failed, if conservatorship failed, there was always another narrative. Emily Carter, unstable surgeon, guilt-ridden after harming sister, takes her own life. Tragic, believable, clean, that folder was the turning point, because it proved something beyond doubt. This wasn't sibling rivalry, this was predation. Daniel was officially charged with conspiracy. He accepted a plea deal within hours. He was never built for prison or loyalty. He provided sworn testimony, detailed planning meetings, financial transfers. Laura's statements about my father, everything. Margaret refused to believe it, until Rivera presented the break line evidence, until Denise admitted perjury, until bank transfers were displayed in black and white. Even then, my mother didn't apologize, she simply looked tired. Some people would rather live in denial than admit they misjudged their child. I didn't need her apology, I needed truth, and truth was finally surfacing. The hospital board called an emergency meeting, suspension lifted, public statement drafted. New evidence has emerged, but I declined the press conference. No interviews, no dramatic return speech. Because power doesn't need spectacle. Power is walking back into an operating room, steady hands, while the world realizes it tried to bury the wrong person. Laura was arrested on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, perjury, and obstruction. When they let her past reporters, she searched for me. I wasn't there. She wanted eye contact, reaction, emotion. I gave her nothing. Because the greatest punishment for someone who thrives on narrative is irrelevance. But one piece remained unfinished. My father. The reopened case uncovered financial transfers from his account to one Laura controlled, forged signatures. He had confronted her, told 2 colleagues he planned to revise his will. The mechanic who replaced the brake line testified under oath. The corrosion wasn't natural, it was cut, deliberately weakened. The accident was reclassified, suspicious. Pending full criminal review, Laura's legal exposure expanded. And for the first time in 10 years, I grieved properly. Not as a daughter who lost a father to rain, but as a daughter who lost him to betrayal. And that grief didn't break me, it crystallized me. Silent revenge isn't about screaming victory, it's about standing still while truth does the screaming for you. Laura thought she orchestrated my destruction. Instead, she exposed herself. In segment 5 is where the final consequences land. Not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. The silence after the storm, there's a strange quiet that follows devastation. Not peace, not relief, just stillness. Like a city after a hurricane, debris everywhere. Sky finally clear, people stepping outside slowly, unsure what survived. That's what my life felt like 6 months later. Laura sat in a holding cell awaiting trial. Daniel had taken a plea deal, 5 years, reduced sentence for cooperation. Denise lost her nursing license permanently. Victor Salerno was indicted on federal charges unrelated to me, but Laura's financial records accelerated the investigation. And my father's case, officially reopened as a criminal homicide investigation. They couldn't charge her yet, but the accident report would never again say weather-related. History had been corrected. That mattered more than headlines. More than apologies, truth restored something inside me, not innocence. Clarity. The hospital reinstated me fully. First day back in the OR felt surreal. Same sterile smell, same hum of machinery, same blue drapes. But I was different, stronger, not emotionally hardened. Sharpened. When you survive betrayal at that scale, your threshold for chaos changes. Nothing rattled me anymore, not blood loss, not complications, not crisis. Because I had already faced something worse than surgical failure. I had faced calculated erasure, and lived. Reporters tried again when Laura's trial date was set. They wanted drama, a statement, a sister versus sister spectacle. I declined every request, because here's something people misunderstand about revenge. It isn't about humiliating your enemy publicly. It's about removing their power privately. Laura no longer controlled the narrative. The courts did. Evidence did, and I did not need to relive it for strangers' entertainment. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified once. Calmly, clinically, I described what I saw, what I switched, what I saved. I did not embellish, I did not cry. I did not look at her. She tried to catch my eyes several times. I kept my focus on the jury, because that was the only audience that mattered. The prosecution presented the footage, the texts, the forged suicide notes, the gambling debts, the conservatorship filing, the break line evidence. Layer by layer, the image Laura had built for the world disintegrated. Not with shouting, not with theatrics, with documentation. That's the thing about lies. They require constant performance. Truth just sits there, heavy, unmovable. When the verdict came back guilty on all major counts. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, perjury, obstruction. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She looked small, smaller than I remembered, because without narrative control, she was just a person in a courtroom. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't orchestrating anything. Sentencing was severe, 22 years. Possibility of extension if the homicide investigation resulted in charges. Daniel testified again during sentencing. He looked broken. Regret ages differently than guilt. Regret is heavy, guilt is corrosive. He never once looked at me, which was fine. I had nothing left to say to him. Margaret visited me 2 weeks after the sentencing. First time we'd been alone since the hospital hallway. She stood in my living room, hands clasped tightly. I was wrong, she said quietly. 3 words, 36 years late. I didn't respond immediately because forgiveness is not automatic, it's intentional. And I wasn't ready to grant it fully, but I also wasn't carrying anger anymore. I know, I said finally, that was enough. Sometimes closure isn't reconciliation, it's acknowledgement. 6 months later, I sold the brownstone. Not because of memories, but because I wanted something that wasn't touched by betrayal. I moved closer to the hospital, smaller place, simpler, less symbolic. Power doesn't need grand stages, it needs stability. People often ask, privately, quietly, how I stayed so calm, how I didn't collapse, how I didn't lash out publicly, how I didn't expose everything immediately. Here's the answer, because panic is exactly what manipulators rely on. They need you reactive, they need you loud, they need you emotional. When you stay still, they overextend. When you stay silent, they fill the silence with mistakes. When you document instead of defend, you win. Not instantly, but permanently. There's one more thing. 3 months after sentencing, Rivera called me. They found new evidence in my father's case. A witness had come forward, a former employee at Laura's boutique. She overheard an argument the week before his accident. Laura screaming, "If you don't sign it, you won't need brakes." The case is still ongoing, but probability matters, and probability no longer favors innocence. When Rivera told me that, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release, because for 10 years I blamed rain, I blamed physics. Now I understand it was choice.